And welcome to Candidates Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman serving as chair. As always, tonight we've got John Gapso on the big board. He's the one who's going to bring you the fun graphics, the images, because tonight we're talking about New York City. I'm your host, Pat Ford. As always, our mantra, we've got a few purposes for their show. We want to give the libertarian community an opportunity to meet our outstanding, not just wonderful anymore, our outstanding down ballot candidates. Folks, the future is now. So many folks on social media talk about how we need to develop a bench. I've had the privilege now for over a year to talk with candidates from around the country, well, quite frankly, from around the planet. Whether you be running for town council, a water board commissioner, or in the case of tonight, for the mayoralty of New York City, we have folks testifying, preaching, if you will, our statement of principles, our philosophy, our movement, and of course, our politics around the country, giving life to a movement that, as we enter our 50th year, has no bounds. I always like to say, for one simple reason. Well, because we're right. On this show, we challenge libertarian candidates to incorporate what I call lunch pail voter issues into a dialogue that can be seen through the prism of the libertarian movement, with a focus and a level of accessibility on the issue itself as it affects regular folks from virtually every type of community. Finally, we seek to create a bond, a recognition, a channel of communications, a brotherhood and sisterhood of candidates and volunteers from around the country, so that we understand how important it is, for example, tonight, to be able to deliver a libertarian message to the boroughs of New York, while at the same time supporting, say, the gold rush as it happened with our friends from the Libertarian Party of Alaska, as we look to the volunteerism that epitomizes the spirit of being a Tennessee volunteer, while at the same time recognizing the incredible growth happening in cities like Miami and all over Florida and the Florida Panhandle. Joining us tonight, Stacey Prussman. She is a candidate to be the mayor of New York City.
My hair's a mess. My hat's a mess. How are you, Pat? Great to be here on a beautiful rainy Friday night here in New York.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. My hair's a mess. It's wet. Oh my God.
How is the city of New York today? Talk to us.
I was out. I'm in Brooklyn. Yes, last night I was in Manhattan. It's interesting. Things are coming back. It's not back, whatever that means. It feels half empty. Or as I like to say, the glass is half full. It's not totally full yet because I'm not elected. But when I'm elected, it'll be totally full and fun again.
Mm-hmm. New York's going through its own protracted reopening.
Yeah, it's weird because it's not like Brooklyn, New York, and boroughs feel a lot different than Manhattan does.
Right.
There's a lot less. I know, at least in the areas I live in and where my mother lives, there's a lot less empty storefronts, but there are, sadly, empty storefronts. But in Manhattan, for some reason, there's a lot of blocks that are empty. A lot of well-known places have closed. Times Square, around there, Broadway hasn't been open, so a lot of those businesses obviously are hit. And when Broadway opens up, I think it's going to be a big change. But it's definitely affected. The tourism business has such a big effect on New York City that the fact that it's closed so long, it definitely has obviously taken effect. The service industry specifically.
The economy of New York, folks claim to be familiar with it, but it's much more complex than, shall we say, the average recognition. We think of Broadway, we think of the entertainment business, we think of tourism, but New York has become a major center of biotech. It has always dominated one of the two or three centers of the world's finance community. How has that been affected, if you will, by this insanity?
I think people work virtually, so I don't know if that has affected specifically maybe real estate, commercial real estate. I think different industries are going to start coming to New York than we had. That I do know. I don't know what, I think we do have a Silicon Alley. I remember back in 2000, early 2000, 99, 98, we had a lot of .com businesses. That was a big boom back then. I think we're going to have a different rush of businesses coming through after this pandemic.
Speak to the complexity of a city like New York. There are entire nations that don't have the GDP, the employees, the school system that a city like New York is. What type of power does the mayor actually have, and what's it like to be the mayor of New York?
I think that the mayor has a lot of power, but also a good mayor will delegate power down below. So for instance, I want to democratize education. I want to bring it back to the communities and take it out of my office. I think it's very important. I don't want to be the czar of the entire, because there's so many different communities throughout the city. There's so many different ethnicities, there's different needs, there's different economic, one block to another, you have, the very, very wealthy to the very, very impoverished, all within a 5-block radius. East Harlem and the Upper East Side are totally two different economic systems. So I think that that's so interesting about our city. And everyone, lives, side by side. And I believe that there's a place that, and I think in a way it's living next to people. I think there's a way to integrate wealth where the poor and the rich can share education, specifically our public education system. And I think that, I want to take zoning out of schools as much. I think that doesn't help. I think that creates one school versus another being a bad school and a good school. And there's a lot of different inequities in New York. And there's a lot of also, I believe, the inequity actually creates, growth as well, because people see that they can move up in the world financially and the opportunities are there in New York. Because I saw it in my own community and I saw it growing up in Brooklyn where I grew up. So I think it's not hopeless in New York if you're not coming from a rich family or if you're not totally, come from generational wealth, for instance. I think that you could actually, in New York specifically, in our city, you can make it here. Even now in this pandemic, I think you can make it here. It's not easy, but you can make it.
Has the complexity of New York and New York government, and speak to the statism, if you will, or speak to, if you will, the all-encompassing nature of government in New York. Has it gotten too big for any one individual? And at this point in time, is it starving innovation?
Well, it was interesting seeing it during the pandemic with Cuomo and the openings, the lockdowns and the closings. And then he had allegations, then he opened the city up. And it was very confusing. One day the restaurants were open and one day the gyms were closed and it was weird. And, the numbers were up and down and the government was, locking us down and it didn't make any sense. And it wasn't really helping at some point, specifically by the summer of 2020. I think that's when we saw it sort of just what is going on here. And the government overreached. Obviously, a lot of businesses shut down because the government overreached. They shut them down. They didn't help them open. The mom and pop stores weren't able to thrive while the big box stores were. And that was horrible because New York was never a city of big box stores. We were always a mom and pop store or a small business per se, or, a singular owner type store. And seeing those stores close was very heartbreaking because they were able to, the big stores were able to survive because they didn't have as much. They had more money. Obviously, they were bigger stores. They were able to social distance more. And while the smaller places, they weren't able to keep up, and plus they were getting fined and all that. So it was very, very serious.
And speak to, if you will, the impact of government on, I'll call it the three New Yorks. There's the New York of neighborhoods. I full disclosure, I've lived in New York City. I worked in New York City for many years. I was born right outside New York City. I am what you refer to as a bridge and tunnel. I was born on the wrong side of the Holland Tunnel. So there's the neighborhoods, and I'm talking about Manhattan, Soho, Tribeca. If you so many provocative cultures, so many different communities. You could go from Chelsea to Soho to Tribeca, and you'd almost feel like you're in three different cities. Brooklyn and Queens, very much the same way. A variety of neighborhoods, cultures, opportunities. All of them are rooted in small business. And
Right.
the eternal search for the newest best Chinese restaurant, the eternal search for great pasta, the eternal search for virtually a restaurant of every type. And then, of course, in addition to the tourism and that city of so many neighborhoods, literally hundreds of neighborhoods. All right, you had, of course, the big corporate presence, particularly in Manhattan, and now touching into Brooklyn and Queens. How is New York City in danger of becoming homogenized and sort of washed out a little bit from its roots?
I think actually after this pandemic, I think it was starting to actually more prior to the pandemic. It was really becoming homogenized. It was becoming Disneyland per se. I mean, in Times Square, and I think that maybe now it has a chance of not becoming homogenized, specifically since the economic downfall would probably stop it from happening.
Right.
Is that I know it's kind of cruel to say, but that's what I'm seeing. But I don't feel that way. I mean, I go to one area which is very Asian, and I get wonderful food, and I go to another area a few blocks away which is Italian, and I have that wonderful food. So I think that it's where I live in Brooklyn, it's not homogenized. There are some areas that are, obviously, but I think that we have a chance now of not becoming homogenized. I mean, and that's sad because a pandemic had to do that.
Right. What
you've being overbuilt to some degree as well. I've been getting a lot of constituents have been complaining about that to me. When I speak to people on the street, when I talk to the people, all kinds, Democrat, Republican, Libertarians, some people have said that, my area is becoming overbuilt, and, what do I do? It's just more apartment buildings. And even during this pandemic, and I don't know if people are moving into these buildings or whatnot. So luxury condos, which is fine if the market decides that to be needed.
There's two, if you will, areas of governance surrounding New York City, obviously, right now. And there's COVID, that sort of all-encompassing, the elephant in the room, as it were. And then there's, again, the operations of a city, and a city where you've got thousands of people who work in their Department of Transportation. You got thousands of people who work in sanitation. You've got police departments literally for each one of them. COVID aside, let's put COVID aside, because I think we're starting to see that, if you will, in our rearview mirrors. Criminal justice is an issue that looms large, or at least how much so for folks who are actually residents of New York City? Because there are two types of people in the world: those who follow New York politics and act like they live there, and some of them work there. And then there's people who actually live there, raise their families, go to schools. Is that the big issue right now?
It's an issue. Criminal justice, obviously, reform. People are. It's interesting. There's two sides, and I've spoken to people again. I talk to people, party aside about it. I've heard from people that, people in communities of color are fearful of crime. I don't know if that's also people, all different ethnicities are fearful of crime. That's a big deal. People are fearful of Asian hate crimes right now. There's a lot of, it's very heated right now. And then also people don't want to be over policed, and they don't want to, there's a lot of of that going on. We don't want our police to overstep and all that, and be, and that's obviously the issue. So there's a happy medium to that. And so we want, how do you prevent crime, right? And then not have the police up down your backs. I mean, that's two separate. So, obviously I want to be tough on violent crime, fair on other crimes, but I think we need to do policing differently. And I think a lot of the crime is stemming from mental illness, and that needs to be addressed. You can't just keep putting paint over mold. We can't just take a wall that has black mold in it that's deadly and then just keep painting over it and pretending it's not there and then saying the problem's fixed. We need to get to the systemic reasons for these issues. So why are we having crime? Why are we being over policed? What are the issues in the police department? How do we retrain them and reform them and fix that whole situation. So this is twofold problem going on in New York, and I've been hearing it from so many different people of all different political backgrounds. So it's something that it's a very sensitive issue, but it's very solvable. First of all, let's deal with the crime. Why are people committing crimes? Are they just being jerks? No, they have a lot of people that commit violent crimes out of nowhere.
Did we just lose her? Stacey, can you hear us? Well, we may be having technical difficulties here for a little bit. We're going to see if we can reach out to Stacey and see if we can bring her back on the line. It's the policing, if you will, and in the reform of policing goes back, the need for which for years. Some of the earliest policing forces were, in fact, private industry, anti-union police forces in the earliest days of New York City. Abner Dualu, and there were a number of cases stretching back from the late 90s, early 2000s onto, if you will, into New York City. And the frustration is that the cycle of violence still exists. Is she back in the room? Can we say she's back in the room? Let's see. All right. So the fundamental question is, why, after all these years, all right, do we have to reinvent the same wheel in terms of policing and police reform? How many more tragedies does it take? And so many of them seem to take place, if you will, in and around the New York area. Eric Garner, for example, essentially criminalized for selling loose cigarettes, if you will, in a period of time in which, for him, it was a matter of survival. I think, John, right now we're going through the Stacey's platform. Okay, so we'll bring that up while we're trying to get Stacey back in. We don't have a time limit tonight, so
yeah, this is the producer, John. We're waiting for for Stacey to get back. I think she lost her signal, but I think we're looking at her platform right here, Pat.
Mm-hmm. So public safety, the promote public safety by supporting police efforts to combat violent crime and protect potentially vulnerable communities by instituting comprehensive police reform. Of course, community policing existed in New York generations ago. And somehow, again, we've reduced policing into this bulk assault force and combined it with a highly mobile set of vehicles that act in almost RoboCop. Fortune, the Prussman plan for coronavirus safety. You're back. We were just going through
my Wi-Fi. We're having a bad storm, and the Wi-Fi just went out. I don't know. I apologize for that.
No worries. Escape the Echo Chamber said New York City is watching. So we were just actually going through your platform, and that's probably a good way to jump back in. And we were starting to talk about
the crime issues.
The crime issues. Now, it seems like there have been screaming needs for criminal justice reform and police reform for generations. I still remember watching Giuliani win his second attempt at being a mayor in a bar in Lower Manhattan, a bar called Finelli's, which, by the way, I believe it's still there. If you ever get it, if anyone listening ever gets to New York City, great burger, old timey New York City bar over on Prince Street. And I can remember the reactions in the run up to the Giuliani second election where he actually won, and New York City residents, actual taxpayers, people who live there, after you went home at night, they actually went to the East Side or Lower Manhattan or Brooklyn, or they took one of the buses out to the burbs. People who actually raised their children there were screaming for some type of help. Even the most liberal folks would quietly admit to having voted for Giuliani the second time around. And out of that came the broken windows method of, if you will, community policing. And ultimately that became morphed into stop and frisk. Where's the balancing, Stacey? Where's the balance point between, broken windows where we prosecute people of quote unquote lifestyle crimes, which as libertarians we abhor. And then all of a sudden after 9/11, it becomes stop and frisk.
Right. I don't believe in stop. Well, I always hated stop and frisk, and I was always getting stop and frisk. Believe it or not, I was always the one. It's funny. I was always getting stop and frisked, and I was always late for my job and my trains and my comedy spot. So I don't believe in stop and frisk at all. I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think policing is going to stop crime. I think policing is a reaction to a violent crime. Like if you do a crime that's illegal and it's violent, you get arrested. I don't think pre-policing is a way to prevent crime, because people that want to commit crime are going to commit crimes, period. If you're mentally ill and you go nuts and start stabbing people, that's something you could not have prevented, because you don't know that person is going to go nuts and start stabbing people. Does that make sense? So you need to deal with this. The base issue is that person has mental health issues, addiction issues, and they snapped. That could be prevented if we have people that are at risk being properly handled by their medical providers or their social workers, or people not being lost in the system that has failed us for so long. Homelessness should not be normalized, and it's been normalized way too long in New York City. As a comedian, you hear hundreds of jokes about this homeless guy said to me, and there's a million jokes that have been going on for years about people making fun of homeless people because it's been normalized. It's like that the guy, the bum, people don't realize these are human beings with mental health issues, addiction issues. Maybe they're just down their luck, and those things need to be solved. No one's ever gotten to the root. As I said, you can't keep covering up black mold with paint.
If in fact you're elected mayor, what would you do in terms of reforming the police department? I mean, post 9/11 in particular, folks should understand that the city of New York actually has its own, if you will, anti-terrorist task force, and actually has their own assets overseas investigating terrorism. Which in that organization is rooted in and based in and subject to the command of the city of New York. So the New York City Police Department has become, if you will, like Los Angeles, where you've got this large militaristic force. How do you balance it all in the real world of New York City? What would you prescribe to do?
Well, first we need to protect our citizens' civil liberties. Always, that's first and foremost. Protect their rights as human beings. Not racial profile people, which is wrong. Use real intelligence to, they know who, I believe, intelligence done, safely and effectively does prevent terrorism crimes. It did. I know people on that task force, and they have done a very good job. I think the main issue is that people don't want to be arrested, harassed for victimless crimes. I think that's the real issue. New York does not need to be a city where people doing victimless crimes are being constantly harangued or harassed, or I think we need to deal with that better. And part of that is legalizing sex work, creating a situation where people don't get arrested for using drugs or trying to legalize drugs. I don't think drugs should be a crime, specifically when they're victimless crimes. So we need to separate those out and focus more on the violent crimes, process those rape kits that have been waiting, for years and not getting processed. So I think that's the way to go right now.
One of your more famous candidates running for the Democratic nomination was a presidential candidate, and he's known largely for being a proponent of UBI. At the same time, it's become apparent after, it's fascinating. You can go through an entire presidential campaign and not get vetted like you do when you run to be the mayor of New York City, because as we found out, let's just say he's relatively adept at, we'll call it resume inflation. But he doesn't actually finish anything. But he sure is on a whole bunch of boards, and he sure allies himself with lots of issues. But let's talk about UBI. In a city like UBI, he's proposing a sort of a variety garden form of it, a lot less money, if you will, than he was talking about as president. I don't think he realized that New York City is one whole hell of a lot more expensive to live than most of the
Right.
places he would have governed as president. What are your thoughts on UBI?
I think it could replace our welfare system, like no questions. But I think every place in the city, particularly, I mean, it's in the world, in our country, the world, the world. You know, the cost of living is so different. So you take Brooklyn versus like Arkansas, it's a totally different cost of living. So $1,000 in Arkansas does not go far. So I mean, to have one universal amount is ridiculous. First of all, let's be honest. I think that the only way the UBI would work is in certain situations where it's available to people that are in real trouble at certain parts of their lives. That, for instance, like instead of like the welfare system where you have to do all this like extra bureaucracy to get, I think it should be a certain wherever you live that, if you go on it for a certain amount of time and then you wean off. I think that's the best way, and not make it to be so it's so bureaucratic. I think that's the only, if you could remove the bureaucracy of our welfare system, I wouldn't call it a universal basic income. I would try to use it instead of a welfare system as a temporary means to get people out of very severe situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. New York City,
homeless, things like that.
New York City schools. Holy cow. Again, the school systems that are bigger than many states. School systems that are just tied up with bureaucracy, tied up with working regulations, tied up with, if you will, unions that have, if folks haven't heard of this, there was something called a phenomenon called the rubber room, where if you were accused of something untoward as working as a teacher for the city of New York, you could be brought off the job. You could still be paid. Mm-hmm. And you were literally sent to these offices.
The rubber, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Oh,
and not
that's
work.
Bye-bye. That's going bye-bye. Like, there's going to be a statute of limitations. You get, whatever your trial is, and those rubber rooms are going bye-bye. They're a waste of our taxpayers' money. They're a waste of they're hurting our students. It's, if you did something really awful, like we need to, if there's a trial, if it's criminal, they need to be fired just like any other job. Sorry, I know some people wait years in those rubber rooms, or right. or bring them to a different job. Then, like, they can't work around kids, but we need to get rid of those. Those are disgusting. It's we don't have the money to waste, and it doesn't help anybody, and particularly doesn't help our students. And that's who I care about, our students.
In New York,
if I do a bad job, you fire me. If I don't, if I don't get laughs at a comedy club, I don't get rehired. If I come to work late, or I do something, if I have a job and I don't produce and make the sales, I get fired. The same thing should happen with teachers. If they are in such situations where they have to be put in a rubber room and they need to go, they need to go, or be tried in a fair trial, or whatever, however they do it, and decide where they should go. If they didn't do something wrong, but if they did do something wrong, they need to go, and we can't be wasting our taxpayers' money on bad teachers.
Right. There exists a phenomenon in New York that isn't widely practiced in the rest of the country in terms of education, and that's the notion of exam schools. And there are some amazing exam schools, but there are also some amazingly bad public schools, and so. The notion of exam schools really predates charters and really predates vouchers. How do you make sense of this? There seems to be such a divide, and in most of these exam schools, you're taking an exam. What is it, 6th or 7th grade, and that literally your performance on that exam could dictate the future of your lives. I mean, how do we make sense of this? Is there any appetite to move prominent
education?
Mm-hmm.
Totally different. We need to look at education as the individual need of the student. Mm-hmm. We need to identify the students' upbringing, their abilities, their wants, their needs, their family dynamic. We need to look at the whole student and not, and then also we need to treat them equally as well. So it's kind of a catch-22 because we're not all equal, but in the real world, we need to bring our students that are performing less or not getting, the education, and we need to make them sort of create a situation where they can thrive, right? And then also reward the students that are doing well at the same time. But I don't think exams are always the way to go. I think we need to look at the student as a whole. And I think exams are good in certain ways. I mean, it can evaluate how you read and how you write and the basic stuff, but it doesn't really get the gist of the student. And I think we need to offer different types of educations for different types of students. I think that it's not a one size fits all. Education is very individual. What I did in 7th grade was very different than I was doing in 12th grade. I was a very bad middle school student. And some people have anxiety and they can't take tests as well. So I think we need to really start, rethinking how we do education. I think that there should be more choice and more democratizing of it, where people are voting who runs their schools, how their schools are run, who teaches, that type of stuff. I think we need a much more diverse choice in education. And we need to really create a system where all students can thrive with their abilities and that they have the opportunities to get excited about school. I did a lot of sub-teaching and lecturing at schools throughout the years, and I noticed that the schools also have a feeling of incarceration. They don't feel like places of learning and happiness. They feel very like institutional and almost like jail sometimes, believe it or not. And I have to go through the metal detectors. It's a very uncomfortable situation. It doesn't feel like I'm going to this happy place whenever I taught. And when I went to school, it didn't feel that way. We were free to come in and out of school. We went out to lunch. We hung out on the lawn. We played guitar. It was a totally different world. And I don't know why it's changed and why the joy that I had going to high school can't be happening in most of our public schools, if not all of our public schools. And I think we're failing our students.
Folks, if you're just joining us, Stacey Prussman is on the line. She's running to be the mayor of New York City as a libertarian. Yes, imagine a living and breathing libertarian in arguably, I believe, to be the bluest, 40 or 50 square miles on the planet. It's an institution, if you will, so complex, so multi-layered. Questions have again started to arise, given the talent, skills of the current mayors, whether one person can be a mayor anymore. Let's talk about the current mayor and the response to COVID, if you will. What would you have done differently?
Well, I think there was a lot of fighting with Cuomo, for instance, in the beginning. Right. The beginning, he's an ineffectual mayor. A lot of his promises over the years he hasn't kept. He wasn't a driving force in our city during COVID, period. Mm-hmm. He didn't help the businesses, motivate the business. There were things that we could have done to maybe not lock down so long, maybe the first month, and then we could have ended the lockdowns, as we figured it out a little bit. It became a shit show, excuse my language, very quickly. And, no one, you want a mayor. Part of being a mayor is motivating, creating optimism, giving hope to people. And I feel that our mayor just didn't do any of that.
Right. There are some who argue, and listen, I go back to Abe Beam and John Lindsay. Okay, that's saying something. I was a little kid, but John Lindsay was quite the charismatic mayor, who basically got sunk by a snowstorm. But this individual is regarded by many as possibly the worst mayor in modern New York's history on literally every level, whether it be criminal justice, whether to establish reform, which he clamored for, and managed to alienate the entire New York City Police Department, and at the same time, really accomplishing nothing at any of the challenges that face a huge, complex organization like the city of New York. Where did New York politically? I mean, let's explain the system here. You've got borough mayors, you've got New York City Council, and then you've got these massive infrastructures, these massive departments. What's the single biggest challenge in terms of facing New York City scope to you?
I think one of the challenges is a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of fat in the system. There's a lot of ineffectual fat in the system. You need to work together. These things exist. I mean, the mayor, the fire department, the police, there's got to be a way that they can coexist together in a healthy relationship. And that, what does that mean? You need, the police exist in New York City. They're always going to, but they don't have to exist as is at the moment. They can exist differently. We can reform them. We can change the way they work. You have a fire department. You need to work with the departments correctly. You need to build relationships. That's very important. It doesn't help to, we need to make sure we get the bad police officers out and have the ones that are effective and good people in there. We need to bring mental health people into the police department that are mental health counselors and psychologists. We need to start working differently, period.
Are there parts of New York City government that you would start to shrink almost immediately, from the perspective as a libertarian?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of, I think that a lot of different organizations that just, the things that, like where we should put money into different places. It's mismanaged. I would consider changing the police department and shrinking the way they handle cases. I wouldn't make them, I think the officers need different types of job. They shouldn't be, and they shouldn't be doing everything. So like a lot of officers told me I do everything and it's not my job, So I think that we need to figure out why they're doing everything and create and take officers out of situations where they don't need to be. That's right. Number one. So I don't know if the word shrink is the right word, but change. I want to actually expand our animal welfare programs. I think that's not getting the attention it needs. See, in certain issues where people want to help, and there's communities that want to help animal rights and animal welfare, we need more of that specifically because that's been lost. Mm-hmm. Animals are one of my passions. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's one of my personal, and I think working in New York, seeing how our shelter system works, it's terrible.
Right. It's
like Rikers Island for jail. I want to get Rikers Island out. I do not want Rikers Island to be Rikers Island. I'd like to make it maybe a half sanctuary for animals and also a rehabilitation center for people who have who aren't violent criminals, but maybe need help, mental health, and that type of thing.
Right. Should organizations like the Department of Transportation and particularly the Department of Sanitation, people don't understand that in the city of New York, there is actually a sanitation police department. There is a Department of Transportation police department. I'm not even aware how many police departments there are in New York City, but there are one whole hell of a lot of them. But, what departments would you slate to outsource, to reduce government dependency on?
Well,
how well do you think that'll play with New York City residents?
Well, sanitation has been an issue. I've noticed in my constituents in the different neighborhoods have been complaining about garbage being there for too many days, not being picked up. So that definitely needs to be. Is there not enough trucks, not enough workers? I don't know what the situation is there. We need to, do better with our garbage. I mean, it's so sad to say, but if you do better with your garbage, you have less rodents, you have less situations with, disease and stuff like that. So our garbage needs to be taken care of better, for sure.
And if folks haven't visited Staten Island, they should understand that I believe Staten Island was one whole hell of a lot smaller 100 years ago than it is now. There's let's just say there's I believe one of the largest landfills on the planet is occupying a significant part of Staten Island.
Well, they built over it. Oh,
Oh man. Running for office in New York City, an incredibly complex media market, neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, every imaginable race, religion, ethnic group. It's a city where sexuality is heavily politicized. I go back to, as I think we talked about pre-show, I go back to the ACT UP movement, who literally changed the face of American politics, as well as changed the face of American healthcare, and also changed the face, if you will, of how folks from the LGBTQ community advocated for themselves.
Silence equals death. Yes, I remember
Right.
that very well.
You and I remember die-ins, and at the time it was pretty shocking stuff, and but yet it was incredibly effective. So, by what method, getting your arms around that as a libertarian, what are some of the techniques you're going to use in terms of running for office?
In terms of what?
In terms of, I mean, it's not easy, the kind of city where you can really go door to door. It's just too big. I mean, I guess you can.
Running for office, like what?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just break into people's houses. I don't care.
but how are you going to simultaneously build up your presence, and you've got a strong presence in the city. You're a professional actress. You've been a comedian, so you are known to people in New York. But how do you bring that to scale? What are your plans?
We have a great using my team. We have a great team of social media, communications team, publicists, going on radio shows like yours, Pat, going to different events, things like that, commercials, and just like every other candidate, just get my name out there, get our platform out there, and get people on board with what our beliefs are. And I think that's the way to do it. Just like any other candidate, just be seen, and be loud, just like ACT UP did, and be strong, and
Right.
and not, succumb to the status quo. And I think that's and preach liberty and through empathy and kindness and compassion. I think that's how I live my life, and I want to run our city and be a part. I was saying this. It's not about my needs. Running for office, and this is very simplistic, but it's really about the people's needs. And what can I do to get out of your way so you can thrive? What can I do to allow your business to grow and be beautiful? And what can I do to let the city flourish and be diverse and fun? And that's really what my job is. Really, at the end of the day, how do I make you feel safe and be safe without bothering you? And I think that's the main objective and how do I make our city function properly, where you can go, not feel like, oh my God, now I have to wait online for 2 hours to get my license, or whatever New York City type of, or whatever the city controls specifically. How can I have my subways not get stuck in between stations and people become late for work or shows or whatever they're doing? So I think that's my job. My job is to make sure that we cut out the bureaucracy. We limit our government and intervention in your life, where we're not hurting you. We're not creating a blockage between you and having a healthy and happy life. And I think and how do we make the city fun? I know it's so simplistic. We need to have fun again. I mean, New York's a fun place.
Right.
We're freaking serious all the time, And I think that's a part of my platform, is just have fun, but just stay out of your way.
Right. Having the average New Yorker, and again, it's talk about a mosaic, but let's paint with a very broad brush right now. The average New Yorker, having faced right in the eye some of the most oppressive infringements, destructions, if you will, of their civil liberties, and I'm not just talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about the entire period of New York City history that started September 11th, 2001, moving forward. Do you get the sense yet that people in New York are ready for some liberty? Do you get the sense they crave it?
We are so primed and ready. You speak to people, the average person, I'm not talking about our libertarians that are very, aware of libertarianism and the values that we have, but you speak to the average New Yorker who might have voted Democrat or Republican, not somebody who's too left or too right, but somebody who, basically someone who's kind of they just want a good life. Most people just want a healthy, they want to feel safe. They want to feel that they're financially secure. They want to feel that their housing secure, their food secure. And they want to be able to have a good time. That's what most people want. They want to thrive in their careers. They want to meet a partner, perhaps. People are human. They want love. They want to feel safe. And I think also they want to feel free. I think after being locked up, it's like being on house arrest. I've never been on house arrest. Yet, but
You and me both.
We were in house arrest, actually, without being, I've never been on house arrest, but can you imagine, we were all on house arrest, and people just don't know how. I was hanging out with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they hadn't been out of the house, and they were very uncomfortable. They didn't know how to, they just had gotten vaccinated. They didn't feel comfortable. They were became totally socially awkward. It's this is going to be affecting people in ways that they don't even realize,
right.
Particularly reemerging, just like when people leave jail. When I left jail, just kidding, 1985. No, joking. That was a joke. I'm trying to be funny here. No, but when you leave jail, when you re-enter society, it's not easy for people. Mm-hmm. There are people that don't want to leave their house either. To realize there are people that are scared to leave or uncomfortable. They don't know what to do. They're they're wearing the mask. They're going into the store. They're vaccinated. They don't know. They're now they're becoming shut-ins. They were so comfortable not having to do anything or not having to be out. They can work from their house. And so now that's a big, what's it called? Reemergence, re-entering society. I think we're going to have to treat people, some people, not all, like they've just got out of jail. Mm-hmm. That same type of energy, that same type of problem is going to happen. How do you get out of lockdown? And I think people are ready for liberty right now, and they don't want to be told they can't go to the gym, or they also, some people are afraid that they don't feel safe. They don't feel like the virus, I'm just talking to the average New Yorker. Not everybody, some people feel that the virus is going to kill them, even though they're vaccinated. I've met people like that too. I'm talking about my friends and people that I've dealt with.
Right. No, absolutely. You've got the reopening right now as we speak, just a few days ago, of going back to the 24-hour New York City subway, which, if you haven't lived in New York, or Chicago, perhaps, or maybe Philadelphia, I can't think of another city that's the heart and soul of the city is the human population coursing through its mass transportation system. It's a phenomenon that has to be seen and lived to truly understand. Yet right now we're faced with the spectacle of empty subway cars still. And
I like empty subway cars.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. We all like them. The finances of the MTA have got to be just in the toilet. I don't even know how. The other big $1 million question, of course, is how do you tax people in a city like New York, where you've just seen literally someone rip out the heart of the economy, and you've got to decide.
There's no value in living in New York. After we ripped up our economy, I'm saying this is running for mayor, but this is the truth. How do you justifiably, tax the way we're taxing? I agree 100%. It's like theft at that point.
Yeah. It's the sales tax burden. The last time I checked, and it's been a while, was 8.25%. Now think of that, folks. I don't even know. It could be higher now. You buy a car, you buy anything of substance at 8.25%. And that's one tax. There's a New York City income tax in addition to a New York state tax.
I'll pay it. I know.
And in addition to a federal tax. That was something people were willing to pay for 2 years ago. My daughter lives, full disclosure, she lives in Brooklyn. It was a premium that folks were willing to pay because they could walk out of their apartments, their condos, their co-ops, whatever, and literally have at their fingertips the finest entertainment in the world, a financial sector that had no bounds, great universities, art and music, and of course the restaurant life.
Well, this is interesting you said that, because I have a good friend that just moved into a building that he was very excited about moving into, that had like the movie theater, that had the food with it, and it was like he was so excited about it, and then it's closed. It's closed. It's done. See ya. It's a mess. There's you can't justify that as the taxes anymore. The city has forever changed.
Right.
New York City has forever changed. And we need to look at that. We need to look at New York as a new city. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a new place now. It's not, we have to wake up and understand that we are not in the place we were 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And the city mayor, the mayor of the New York City, you look at the great mayors over time, people like LaGuardia, you look at Ed Koch, you look at even in his heyday, Giuliani, before he went crazy. But as mayor of New York, they were cheerleaders for the city. They were inspirations for the city. They raised the city up. Are you prepared to become that person who puts the fire back in the belly of New York City?
I want to put the fire under your asses, guys. I'm going to come on. Let's get to work, motherfuckers. License. Let's get back to it. Come on. I'm here for you. I'm going to be your best. I'm going to be your best cheerleader. I'm going to stay out of your way. I'm going to be on the sidelines cheering you on, giving you the support you need. That's who I'm going to be as a mayor. I'm going to make you feel good. I'm going to tell you when you're doing things wrong, but I'm going to be your best supporter. And that's what I'm going to do at the very least. I'm going to stay, I'm going to make sure that things run smoothly as best as I can. I'm not going to make false promises. I'm not going to be a bad, cheerleader. I'm going to make the city feel like they can do it. Like if someone makes you feel like you can do it on your own, that's the best gift you can give to anybody. As a teacher, as a leader, as a mayor, I want to lead with compassion, with love, with caring. And I just want to totally just bring the city forward.
Now, I had an idea. I had sort of an epiphany this afternoon as I was thinking about what to talk about and to come up with an idea. And here's my idea, because I'm smart like that, right? I'm wicked smart. How about this? The Prussman for Mayor See New York City tour, where folks are looking to get out of their house, they're looking to go on vacation, they're looking to go someplace for 4 or 5 days, come to New York, sample some of New York's cuisine, hopefully soon it's nightlife, but at the same time, see New York City, not just through the eyes of a tourist, because I can tell you that for the zombies who do the circles around Times Square, that ain't New York. New York is Bensonhurst. New York is New York is Sunnyside. New York is the West Village. New York is Soho, and that's New York. So my proposal to you is that we start a vacation program, a working vacation program, where people come to New York City, have some fun, but also spend a few days touring the city of New York as a volunteer of the Stacey Prussman campaign. How do you feel about that?
I love it. Come to my New York.
The real New York.
The real New York. Yeah. Come to my New York.
Where New Yorkers go. You know the best places, and I know them, the best places for bagels.
Do the Stacey Prussman for Mayor tour. You'll see the real New York. You'll love New York. You'll fall back in love with New York.
Absolutely.
I will take you to places that will make your heart beat again.
Right.
I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I'm going to just throw money at this problem and that, I believe that that's another thing that a lot of the, doing a lot of mayoral forums, it's going to throw money. Donate to my campaign because we need the money. I want to pay my staff unlike other campaigns. Anyway.
Well, and that's the part of the show we're at, because I think I told you we believe, we absolutely embrace the notion of shameless self-promotion here. So as someone who is a longtime employee and for a few years a resident of Sunnyside, Queens, I can tell you that the cost of doing business in New York is pretty high. So you need money, and there, it literally is going to be virtually limitless. This is the first time in 8 years that the mayoralty is opened up per se. It's a wide open race. Anybody can do anything. Anybody can accomplish anything in this race. You've got a great team. I know Larry Sharp is involved with you.
We have great products on my store, thanks to Mr.
Yep.
We were written up in New York Magazine. I mean, people don't believe that, if people are voting for someone just because they don't think that the libertarians can win, but they're voting for somebody just because they think that we don't have a chance, then the liberty movement will never take off.
Right.
We need to vote for somebody. I'm on Wikipedia.
The sheer return on a presence of a strong mayoralty candidacy in libertarian in New York is exponential.
If you think you're throwing your vote away, then don't vote for me, because that means you're throwing. If you don't believe in what we're doing, then we don't need your vote.
Well, you've got a great New York State organization, but give us your websites. Give us all the rundown. How can folks contribute to you? And I know you've got some money bombs going on. Give us the landscape.
If you want to go on a tour with me, I'm open to tour you around. We'll do a group tour of New York City. We'll take you to the best restaurants, the most fun, the real Brooklyn, the real Queens, the real Bronx, the real Staten Island, the real Manhattan. We're going to not do it the tourist way. We're going to do it the native New Yorker way. That's a good idea, Pat. I thought it was a great idea. Go to PrussmanForMayor.com, donate, get involved in my campaign, volunteer, do what you can. No small amount is too little. If 100 people donate $20, that's great. That's awesome. If 100 people donate $100, it's even better. Donate. We're a libertarian campaign. We're working really hard. We have an amazing team that's working their butts off to get us out there. I love them dearly. We have a hardworking group, and we need your donations to win. We need to get out of this monopoly situation in New York City. We need to get out of it. If you want to help me get out of this monopoly situation and you want New York to thrive and not have the same old crap, vote for me, donate, and volunteer. Excellent. Well, and let's wake New York the F up.
Again, it's the opportunities are astonishing, and that's what we need to look at. We can't look at them as insurmountable challenges. We need to look at them as opportunities to embrace and to just blow the hell up. I'm with you completely. I love the idea of the tour because I thought of it, but it's
a great idea. You get a commission.
Listen, I'm gonna.
I think it's a great idea. It's very different. We did our petition. Our petitioning season is over now, so we're all about campaigning and fundraising and fun, and that's what's next. We're just going to, doing a lot of press conferences and things like that. And there's always a lot of mayoral forums on different subjects. I've been doing hundreds of them. I've been doing, and then once the primary is over, I believe it's just going to be about 3 or 4 candidates, against each other, maybe just 3. So it's going to be a lot of very exciting time once these primaries are done.
Absolutely. Well, listen, congratulations on the effort. It's stunning to have someone with, as they say, the skills to pay the bills, running at that level in New York City. Again, the opportunities are boundless, endless, and as the kids say, a hell of a good time. So
donate, guys. Help us out. We have a great team. Help us win. Make noise here. Actually, let's do this, guys, together. We're going to be, Yang, let's get him out. Let's get us in. Let's move forward with liberty, compassion, and love. And let's really do this because we need to work at making New York wake up again. Wake the F up, New York. Make it 24 hours. Take away, zoning that doesn't work. Reform the zoning. Restructure our police department. Become, a free and fair city so your businesses could thrive. Your children could choose how they wanted their education, and you can help and vote for who runs your schools, how your schools are run. Don't you want that freedom?
We do.
Yep. So do I. And I will help you do that. Thank you. Vote Prussman for mayor.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Pat. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the weather if it's nice there.
Well, and let us know too if you're doing any events, in the city as far as campaign events, because what this show is going to do is whenever the opportunity exists, we're going to, on a weekly basis, share events that are happening for campaigns around the country
Thank you.
that people could jump on.
Oh, we have some great events coming up, so I'll let you know about it. Comedy shows and
Can you get us?
events and
I'm going to date myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to date myself here. Can you get us in to meet How Weird?
What?
I'm old enough to remember when they called him How Weird Stern.
Oh, Howard. Yeah, I'd love to go back on the show if they have me. I was lucky enough to be on the show 2 or 3 times. So, yeah, let's do that. You know, I'm going to be on radio shows booked. I have a million radio shows booked. So, yeah, let's do this. I mean, I love being out and I love talking to people. I love to hear what people need. And that's one of my favorite things to do as mayor is how may I serve you, you know, as a person. And that's what I believe any political candidate should be, or politician, or somebody who's an elected official. You're representing the people of the place that you're running. So I think that we need to remind our politicians that. I think this has been a wonderful time.
Well, folks, you've been listening to Candidate Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henson serving as chair. John Gapso has always been on the big board. He's been the one putting up the graphics and the maps and all the fun stuff. My name is Pat Ford. I've been your host. It is an incredible honor to be able to address the libertarian community on a weekly basis. Now, remember, we've got shows on LPTV just about every night. Monday night, we'll be back on, if you will, with the Affiliate Support Committee and talking again with affiliates from around the country, sharing best practices, ideas, events, candidates, candidate recruiting, all of that. So be sure to take a few minutes, join us Monday night, 9 p.m. As we always say, same bat time, same bat station. You can see us on LPTV, the Libertarian Party YouTube page, and of course, the Libertarian Party Facebook page. So have a wonderful, safe, blessed Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you Monday night.
Thank you.